Ha, Zia Hutzata Atsadza. English Zia Oscar Dennis. Didi video ke da edla ete da dore stitl. Edla de Zia Tennis Ma. English de Zia Mary Brown Dennis. Edla de Ma Hazel Henu. Hazel Daisy Henu Peter Henu who tue. Edla de ta Murray Brown. Murray Brown Chiona de Dotsehi. Murray Brown de ta Yahoo Brown de Ma Emma Carter. Eta de Zia Bata English de Zia James Dennis. Eta Tahltan Berlek Gitsan Ja de Dini. Chiona de Dotsehi. Eta de Ma Simkelt ede Tsini Tsi Kladal. Eta de ta de Zia Hutzata English de Zia Alec Dennis. Alec Tsiskia de Dotsehi. Deka Ma Tsini Kladal. Bev Slater Tlabana Kwak Tsini Uye. Kuji eta tsini da dodas ditl etokan daka ke ga de guna dina edu Tahltan hoda de. I would like to share with you how my father's people, the Bear Lakers and the Gitsan, came to be in Tahltan Territory. This is a touchy political subject, but much of the dysfunction we endure as a nation stems from this history. Therefore, it must be addressed and rectified. My father's people's presence on our territory has been a significant historical factor contributing to the division among us. Addressing this history in a healthy manner, according to our customs, is crucial to the unification of our nation. The division among us does not stem from the arrival and settlement of these two groups in Tahltan Territory per se. Instead, the division stems from 1. The deviation from our traditional social and political structures, which would have had mechanisms to formally bring women into our nation peacefully, especially during a time when our population was so greatly reduced. And 2, bureaucratic efforts such as the Royal Commission on Indian Affairs for the Province of British Columbia, 1914 to 1916. The Commission allotted reserve land to these two groups without input from the Tahltan. These two issues must be addressed for us to unite as a nation. Women from other nations have been marrying into the Tahltan Nation since time immemorial. That is why our tribal districts are named after the neighboring nations that surround our territory. However, around the time my father's people arrived, we had already abandoned our traditional social and political system. Without our traditional system, we did not have the mechanism to integrate the Bear Lake and Gitsan women into our society through proper traditional protocols. During the time of their arrival, our nation was reduced significantly by smallpox epidemics, and as a mechanism of survival, we abandoned our traditional system. The first epidemic came between 1832 and 1838, and it wiped out a huge portion of our population. The second epidemic arrived between 1847 and 1849, and more than half of the remaining population died, and even more died from starvation the following winter. It was during this period that the leaders of the various Tahltan tribes changed the traditional social and political system. It was agreed that to maintain their identity, the remnants of the various tribal districts would gather at Tahltan village, and they relaxed their laws to begin rebuilding the population, allowing Tahltan women to marry European men. Some estimates put the survival numbers at 220 individuals, but at the signing of the 1910 Tahltan Declaration, there were only 82 Tahltan individuals accounted for. The number is written into the declaration document. The Royal Commission on Indian Affairs for British Columbia was a joint federal and provincial venture established to resolve the Indian land question. The primary mandate of the commission was to adjust the acreage of Indian reserves in British Columbia. The government believed within its colonial mindset that if additional reserves were created and put aside for the First Nations bands, they would be satisfied and naturally assimilate. The commission traveled throughout the BC province, visiting nearly every band, asking them what little piece of their traditional territories they would like to set aside for them as reserves. The Tahltan wanted no part of the strategy to confine Indians to small, isolated parcels of land within their traditional territory. They had made it absolutely clear to all concerned in their 1910 Tahltan Declaration, and they refused to talk about reserves. It was during the critical period of the Royal Commission for British Columbia, 1914 to 1916, that colonial decisions were being made, which resulted in reserves being created without input from the Tahltan. The Tahltan, still reeling from the devastating onslaught of disease, alcohol, and the pervasive impacts of the white man's economic and political power, played no part in the decisions being made regarding their land. These decisions, without Tahltan input and the abandoning of our traditional system, are the underlying issues that have contributed to the dysfunction we endure as a nation. These are issues that must be addressed for us to move beyond the mistrust and corruption in our government. Around 1870, a Gitxsan woman married into the Tahltan Nation. This woman is said to be from the village of Kispiox, BC. The Gitxsan woman married a man named Ol Kwok from the Wolf Fratry. Therefore, as our traditional marriage custom dictate, this Gitxsan wife was placed into the opposite Raven Fratry and was given the Tahltan Raven name, Dekama. Dekama was placed within the Raven Fratry, and therefore she was accepted into the Tlabanut and Raven tribe, and her children were granted permission to utilize the Tlapan, Spotsezi, and Upper Stikine River area as their hunting grounds. Dekama had 10 children on Tahltan Territory. It is her children who became the group that is known as Tlabanakwak. Beverly Slater is descended from this woman. She is my father's relative. These people are Tahltan through their father and were registered with the government as the Tlapan River Indians. In 1936, the Kluachone Lake Reserve No. 1 was purchased for them by the Crown Provincial. This reserve is located at the outlet of Kluachone Lake. When the Gitxsan woman relocated to Tahltan Territory, she brought a Bear Lake woman with her. The woman was from Fort Conley on the shores of Bear Lake. The Tahltan name given to her is Simkalt'ere. The people from Bear Lake are a mixture of Gitxsan and Sekani. Once Dekama was married, she settled in Telegraph Creek, and Simkalt'ere married a Tahltan Sekani person by the name of Old Dennis, and they moved into the headwaters of the Stikine River, Kerbuhide or Maetsindana. Old Dennis was half Tahltan. His mother was a Sekani woman who married a Tahltan fellow named Clake. When Clake brought his Sekani wife to Tahltan Territory, she had one son named Jim Moyez. Clake was from the Raven Fratry, and his name was passed on to Dekama's son Nelson Kwok. Rocky Jackson now has the name. Simkalt'ere and Old Dennis had 8 children. 3 of the children were daughters, Sophie, Mary, and Elizabeth. My father's matrilineal great-grandmother is Sophie. Annie Louie's grandmother is Mary, and Elizabeth John left the territory with a fellow named Silly John. My father comes from the Sophie house, etc. 4 of Dekama and Old Kwok's children married Simkalt'ere and Old Dennis's children. The other 5 married Tahltan individuals. These 2 women played a key role in rebuilding our population. Over the last 120 years, their descendants have integrated further into the Tahltan Nation and all have varying degrees of Tahltan blood. However, these two families have only been living among us for around 150 years, and they have only been included in our political system for a little over 20 years. Much of our division originated from this history, and it is time we utilized our traditional protocols to formalize their place to restore unity. This is crucial. We must do this to rid ourselves of the division this era has created. Should we return to our traditional system, we can utilize our system to formally place the two women into our nation. This would be a positive step towards unity and ridding our nation of one of the main causes of the underlying social dysfunction and political toxicity we endure as a nation. Kujitledethit ats gawat